The white council chamber stretched wide like an empty field of snow. 12 different species sat around the curved table that glowed with soft blue light. Each delegate wore their species' formal robes, but only one carried a weapon. Ambassador Kang Minho adjusted his plasma sidearm as he reviewed his notes. The weight felt normal against his hip after 20 years of diplomatic service. He had worn it to every single council meeting, and today would be no different. Juhana sat behind him, her new diplomat badge still shiny. She had graduated from the academy just 3 months ago. This was only her 5th council session, and she still noticed things that experienced diplomats ignored. Like how the insect-like Veltar clicked their claws nervously whenever Minho moved, or how the crystal beings called Zephyrians dimmed their natural glow when they looked at his weapon. The session began with trade reports. Captain Velkan of the Hive Collective spoke about mineral exports. His voice buzzed through the translator device. Elders on high discussed energy sharing between the crystal worlds. Her voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Hana watched the other delegates. The gas cloud beings called nebulans swirled in their containment suits. The water people known as Aquarians rippled in their mobile tanks. Every species looked peaceful and advanced. They had moved beyond the need for weapons centuries ago, according to her academy textbooks. So why did humans still carry guns? The morning discussions went smoothly. Small disputes about shipping routes were settled with calm words. Border adjustments between systems were agreed upon with polite nods. Everything seemed civilized and proper. Then Ambassador Velkan raised a pointed claw. "I wish to make a formal inquiry," the insect being announced. His compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights like black mirrors. "We request information about Human Privilege Protocol 7 Alpha." The chamber fell silent. Even the quiet hum of air recyclers seemed to stop. Velkan continued. "Why do these mammals carry weapons in our sacred halls of peace? All other species have evolved beyond such primitive tools. We deposit our natural defenses before entering. We trust in the power of words and reason, yet humans bring instruments of death to diplomatic meetings." Several delegates shifted in their seats. The nebulans swirled faster in their suits, showing agitation. The Aquarians created small whirlpools in their tanks. Elder Zonhai quickly stood up, her crystal body catching the light. The Veltar delegate withdraws his inquiry. "This topic requires no discussion." "I do not withdraw," Velkan started. "The inquiry is withdrawn," Zonhai repeated firmly. Her voice now sounded like ice cracking under pressure. Velkan's antennae twitched, but he sat down. Other delegates looked uncomfortable. The nebulans had stopped swirling entirely. The room felt heavy with unspoken tension. Minho had not moved during the exchange. His hand remained on the table, nowhere near his weapon. His face showed no emotion. But Hana noticed that his eyes had become very alert, scanning each delegate carefully. The session continued, but the mood had changed. Discussions became shorter. Agreements came faster. Nobody wanted to extend the meeting longer than necessary. As delegates began filing out, Hana saw the way they moved around Minho. They gave him extra space, as if his weapon might suddenly jump from its holster. The Veltar delegate left quickly, not looking back. The crystal beings moved in a tight group, their light dim and cautious. Only when the chamber was nearly empty did Hana approach her mentor. "Ambassador Minho," she said quietly, "why did Elder Zonhai stop the inquiry so fast? And why does everyone seem afraid of your weapon?" Minho packed his papers slowly. He had heard this question before from new diplomats. Each time he wondered how much truth they were ready to handle. "Walk with me," he said. They left the chamber together, their footsteps echoing in the wide corridors of Nexus Station. The station served as neutral ground for all species, built at the exact center of known space. Its walls held no decorations that might favor one species over another. Everything was designed to be perfectly neutral and peaceful. "The other delegates are not afraid of my weapon," Minho explained as they walked. "They are afraid of what it represents." "I don't understand." "Every species in that room has the ability to kill, Hana. The Veltar have acid glands and razor-sharp claws. The Zephyrians can create blinding light flashes and shoot crystal spikes. The nebulans can release poisonous gases. The Aquarians can generate electrical charges that would stop a heart instantly." Hana frowned. "But they evolved beyond violence. That's what we learned in school." "No," Minho said. They evolved better ways to hide their violence. They reached the viewing deck where a massive window showed the stars beyond. Ships from dozens of species moved through space in orderly patterns. Everything looked peaceful and organized. My weapon is visible, Minho continued. Everyone can see it. Everyone knows what it can do. There are no secrets, no hidden abilities. When I draw this weapon, every being in the room knows exactly what is happening. But the other species carry their weapons inside their bodies, built into their biology, hidden from view until the moment they choose to use them. Tell me, which is more dangerous? The weapon you can see or the one you cannot? Hana stared out at the stars, thinking. The Academy had taught her that evolution meant leaving violence behind. But Minho was suggesting something different, something more complex. There is a reason, Minho said, why humans are the only species allowed to be armed in council halls. A reason that goes back 60 years, to the early days of the Galactic Council. A reason written in blood and sealed with the deaths of 47 delegates. What happened 60 years ago? Minho looked tired suddenly, as if the weight of old memories pressed down on him. Tomorrow I will show you the classified files. You need to understand why Protocol 7 Alpha exists, why every human diplomat carries a weapon, why the other species fear what they see but trust what they know. He turned away from the window. The truth is not comfortable, Hana. It will change how you see every species in that council chamber. It will change how you see humanity's role in this galaxy. Are you ready for that? Hana looked back toward the council chambers, thinking of the nervous clicks and dimmed lights she had witnessed. She thought about the quick withdrawal of Velkan's inquiry and the uncomfortable silence that had followed. Yes, she said. I need to know, Minho nodded. Then meet me tomorrow morning in my quarters. Bring a strong stomach. The history you're about to learn is written in violence that your academy textbooks never mentioned. As they walked back through the peaceful corridors, Hana noticed security cameras watching their every move. Human guards stood at key intersections, their weapons visible and ready. She had never wondered why before. Now she was beginning to realize that the peace of Nexus Station might depend on things she had never imagined. Hana arrived early the next morning, her mind full of questions from the previous day's revelations. Minho was already waiting with the secure display active and a cup of strong coffee in his hands. Today you will see exactly what happened in that council chamber, he said. The footage was recovered from security cameras and Dr. Yoon's personal recorder. It has never been shown to junior diplomats before. The screen displayed a timestamp, 60 years, 4 months, and 12 days ago. The old council chamber appeared, filled with delegates from all species. Everyone looked formal and professional in their diplomatic robes. This was hour 16 of the marathon negotiation session, Minho explained. Everyone had been locked in that room for over 15 hours, trying to reach an agreement about the Kepler system. Hana could see the tension in the room even through the silent footage. Delegates sat rigidly in their chairs. The Veltar delegation clustered together on one side, their antennae twitching constantly. The Zephyrian crystals had developed visible cracks along their surfaces. Prime Counselor Lee Jiwon was moderating the session. Minho pointed to a tired-looking woman at the head of the table. She had been trained in human diplomatic protocols, but this was her first major crisis. The footage showed Lee trying to maintain order as arguments grew more heated. Species representatives gestured more wildly. The Nebulans in their containment suits began swirling in agitated patterns. Dr. Yoon was taking notes in the corner. Minho indicated the nervous man with thick glasses. His job was to document communication patterns between species. He had no idea he was about to witness the breakdown of galactic civilization. Hana watched Dr. Yoon scribbling on his tablet, completely focused on his work. He looked harmless and scholarly, not someone who would survive a massacre through quick thinking. The breaking point came when Queen Jithka of the Veltar made a formal territorial claim, Minho said. She declared that the Hive Collective had absolute rights to Kepler 442 based on ancient exploration records. On screen, Queen Jithka rose from her seat. Her insectoid body was larger than the other Veltar delegates, with more pronounced claws and darker coloring. When she spoke, her mandibles clicked aggressively. Elder Zonhai responded by rejecting the claim entirely, Minho continued. She stated that Zephyrian crystal ships had been studying the system for centuries, giving them scientific priority. The crystal being's response was clearly angry, even without sound. Her translucent body blazed with bright internal light. and several smaller crystals around her began to resonate in harmony. That was when Dr. Yoon noticed the biological changes. Minho said, "Look at his reaction." Hana saw Dr. Yoon suddenly look up from his tablet, his eyes widening as he stared at the arguing delegates. He began typing frantically, his fingers moving quickly across the device. He was recording abnormal pheromone production from the Veltar, Minho explained. Their exoskeletons were expanding slightly, indicating internal pressure changes. The Zephyrians were generating unusual electromagnetic fields. Even the peaceful Aquarians were showing electrical activity beyond normal ranges. He knew what was coming? He suspected. But there was no way to warn anyone without breaking protocol. Junior observers were not allowed to interrupt formal negotiations. The footage showed Dr. Yoon looking around desperately, but all the other delegates were focused on the increasingly hostile exchange between Queen Jithka and Elder Zonhai. The transformation happened in seconds, Minho said quietly. 60 years of peaceful evolution was stripped away in the time it takes to draw a breath. Hana watched in horror as Queen Jithka's diplomatic composure suddenly vanished. The insect being's exoskeleton split open along hidden seams, revealing razor-sharp blades that had been concealed beneath the surface. Acid began dripping from specialized glands near her mandibles. The Veltar had never abandoned their weapons, Minho said. They had simply evolved to hide them better. Other Veltar delegates underwent similar transformations. Hidden claws extended from their arms. Poison sacs became visible beneath their throats. What had appeared to be a peaceful diplomatic delegation was revealed as a fully armed military unit. The Zephyrians tried to defend themselves. Minho continued as the footage showed the crystal beings blazing with desperate light. But they were scholars and philosophers, not warriors. Their defensive capabilities were limited. Elder Zonhai generated a blinding flash that would have stunned most attackers, but the Veltar had protective membranes over their compound eyes. The crystal spikes she launched bounced harmlessly off the insect's hardened carapaces. The other species were caught completely off guard, Minho said. The Nebulans tried to release defensive gases, but their containment suits limited their options. The Aquarians generated electrical charges, but they were too far from the main combat to be effective. Hana watched in sick fascination as the peaceful council chamber became a battlefield. Delegates who had been calmly discussing trade agreements minutes before were now fighting for their lives with biological weapons that evolution had hidden inside their bodies. Dr. Yoon saved himself by diving into an emergency shelter pod. Minho pointed out the small figure scrambling across the floor. Those pods were designed for fire emergencies, not armed combat, but the thick walls protected him from acid and projectiles. The massacre lasted only minutes, but the footage felt like hours. When it ended, nearly half the delegates lay dead or dying on the chamber floor. The survivors huddled in corners, some injured, all traumatized. Queen Jithika tried to claim the attack was self-defense, Minho said as the footage showed the Veltar queen addressing the surviving delegates. She argued that the other species had been preparing to use their own biological weapons. Were they? Medical examination of the bodies revealed that most species had been undergoing stress-related biological changes. The Zephyrians had been building up electromagnetic charges. The Nebulons had been producing toxic compounds. Even the peaceful Aquarians showed signs of electrical preparation. So everyone was getting ready to fight? Everyone except humans, Minho said. The human delegates showed normal stress indicators, but no biological weapon preparation. Because humans don't have biological weapons to prepare. The screen showed the aftermath as emergency teams arrived. Human medics worked alongside alien doctors to treat the wounded. Captain Do-hyun led a security team that had finally been allowed onto the station. It took 18 hours for rescue teams to reach the survivors, Minho said. 18 hours locked in a chamber with the dead and dying, wondering if the violence would start again. How did Dr. Yoon survive that long? The emergency pod had basic life support and communication equipment. He was able to send detailed reports about what he had witnessed. His testimony became the most important evidence in the investigation that followed. The footage showed Dr. Yoon being helped from his shelter, pale and shaken but alive. His tablet contained detailed biological readings from the moments before and during the attack. The most shocking discovery was not that the Veltar had attacked, Minho said. It was that every single species in that room had been preparing for violence while maintaining perfect diplomatic facades. Even the ones who were killed. especially the ones who were killed. Post-mortem analysis revealed that the Zephyrians had been building up energy for devastating light attacks. The Nebulons had been preparing to flood the chamber with toxic gases. The Aquarians were ready to electrify every water source on the station. Hana stared at the screen in disbelief. So the peaceful council session was actually a room full of hidden weapons? A room full of hidden weapons being carried by delegates who publicly claimed to have evolved beyond violence, Minho confirmed. The Veltar simply struck first, but why? Why plan a massacre during diplomatic negotiations? Because they believed they could eliminate their competition for the Kepler system and make it look like self-defense. Kill the rival claimants, then argue that they had been forced to use their natural abilities to protect themselves from aggression. The screen showed intelligence reports that had been compiled after the massacre. Secret communications between Veltar colonies revealed months of planning for what they called a diplomatic solution to the Kepler problem. The investigation revealed something even worse, Minho said. The Veltar were not acting alone. They had formed a shadow alliance with several other species, planning to eliminate competitors through coordinated evolutionary responses while maintaining plausible deniability. How many species were involved? At least 6, maybe more. The plan was to gradually reduce the number of voices in the council through carefully orchestrated conflicts that would look like natural evolutionary responses to stress. Hana felt sick. They were going to destroy the council from within. They were going to reshape the galaxy according to their own interests, using biological weapons that nobody could regulate or control. Hidden weapons, secret weapons, weapons that evolved species claimed they no longer possessed. The screen returned to the empty council chamber, now a crime scene marked with the evidence of violence that had shattered 60 years of peaceful cooperation. This is why humans are now the only species allowed to carry weapons in council halls, Minho said. The next morning, Hana arrived at Ambassador Minho's quarters exactly on time. The door slid open to reveal a simple room with basic furniture and walls covered in diplomatic awards from different worlds. But her attention was drawn to a large secure display screen that dominated one wall. "Sit down," Minho said, gesturing to a comfortable chair. "What you are about to see is classified at the highest levels. Only senior diplomats and security personnel have access to these files." He activated the screen with his biometric signature. The display showed the seal of the Galactic Council, but this version was different from the current one. Older, simpler. 60 years ago, Minho began, the Galactic Council was very young. Humanity had just joined as the 13th member species. We were excited to be part of something bigger than ourselves, to join a community of advanced civilizations that had moved beyond war and conflict. The screen showed images of early council meetings. Hana could see humans in their formal diplomatic uniforms looking eager and hopeful. The other species appeared much the same as today, but somehow the atmosphere felt different in these old recordings. "Our first ambassador was Councillor Park So-min," Minho continued. A woman's face appeared on screen, middle-aged with kind eyes but a strong jaw. She was brilliant, idealistic, and completely unprepared for what she would face. The images shifted to show the old council chamber. It looked similar to the current one, but smaller and less formal. There were no security stations, no guard posts, no visible safety measures of any kind. The council operated under something called the Pure Peace Protocol, Minho explained. No weapons of any kind were allowed on Nexus Station. No security forces, no guards. The theory was that truly civilized beings had no need for such things. Hana watched as the historical footage showed delegates arriving for meetings. Each species went through scanners that checked for metal objects, energy weapons, or explosive materials. Everyone passed through cleanly. The other species saw this as proof of their advancement, Minho said. They had evolved beyond the need for crude tools and primitive weapons. They settled all disputes through calm discussion and logical argument. "That sounds wonderful," Hana said. It was wonderful in theory. But Park So-min began to notice problems. The screen showed internal reports from the human delegation. Park's handwriting filled document after document, noting increasing tensions between different species. Trade disputes were becoming heated. Border disagreements were turning into angry shouting matches. The biggest conflict was over the Kepler system, Minho continued, rich in rare minerals perfect for colonization and claimed by multiple species. The Veltar insisted they had historical rights. The Zephyrians argued territorial proximity. The Nebulans claimed scientific priority. Hana saw recordings of these debates. The Veltar delegate, Queen Jithka, gestured wildly with her claws as she spoke. Elder crystals from the Zephyrian worlds glowed brighter as their arguments grew more passionate. The Nebulan representative swirled faster and faster in his containment suit. Park tried to suggest basic security measures, Minho said, just in case. But the other species were insulted by the very idea. The screen showed a heated exchange between Park and Queen Jithka. Even without sound, their body language showed clear disagreement. Queen Jithka was particularly offended, Minho noted. She said, and I quote, "Civilized beings settle disputes through reason, not threat of force. Only primitive species cling to barbaric tools when superior minds can solve any problem through discussion. So what did we do? We followed the rules. Captain Kim Do-hyun commanded our security detail, but he was forced to keep his team on the human ships outside the station. They could not provide even basic protection while respecting council protocols." The screen showed Captain Do-hyun, a young man with sharp eyes and a frustrated expression. His reports detailed growing concerns about delegate safety as arguments became more intense. The breaking point came during a special session about Kepler 442, Minho said. The star system everyone wanted. 3 species had legitimate claims. Negotiations had been going on for months with no progress. New footage appeared, showing the council chamber packed with delegates from multiple species. The atmosphere looked tense even in the silent historical recording. Our observer was Dr. Yoon Min-seok, a xenobiologist studying interspecies communication. His job was to take notes and stay quiet. He had no diplomatic authority. A man with thick glasses and nervous hands appeared on screen, sitting in a corner of the chamber with a data tablet. The session started normally, Minho continued. Trade proposals, resource allocation, the usual diplomatic language. But our human delegation noticed things the other species missed. What kind of things? Biological changes. The Veltar were producing different pheromones. Their exoskeletons showed stress fractures that indicated internal pressure changes. The Zephyrians' crystal bodies were developing microfractures. Energy readings from the Nebulans showed unusual chemical reactions. Hana leaned forward. What did that mean? It meant they were preparing for war. The screen showed bio readings from the session. Graphs and charts indicated rising stress levels, chemical changes, and physical alterations in multiple species. But humans were the only species that recognized these warning signs, Minho said. The other delegates thought they were witnessing passionate debate. We knew we were watching preparation for violence. Did you warn them? Park tried. She sent urgent messages to the council leadership. She requested an emergency recess to allow tempers to cool. Her requests were denied as unnecessary paranoia from a primitive species still learning civilized behavior. The screen showed Park's increasingly desperate reports. Her handwriting became more urgent with each document. The final session was scheduled for 18 hours of continuous negotiation, Minho said. The council believed that forcing everyone to stay in the same room would eventually lead to compromise. And did it? No, Minho said quietly. It led to the worst massacre in galactic diplomatic history. The screen went dark for a moment. When it returned, it showed the aftermath of something terrible. Emergency lights flashed in empty corridors. Medical teams rushed through hallways. The peaceful atmosphere of the station was completely gone. 47 delegates died that day, Minho said. 6 different species lost representatives. The council chamber became a slaughterhouse. Hana stared at the screen in shock. But how? The security scanners would have detected weapons. They did detect weapons, Minho replied. Every single delegate passed the scanners perfectly. No metal objects, no energy weapons, no explosives. The scanners worked exactly as designed. Then how? The scanners were designed to detect artificial weapons, tools made by intelligent species. They were never programmed to detect biological weapons, natural weapons, weapons that grew inside the bodies of seemingly peaceful species. The screen showed medical reports from the massacre. Images too graphic for Hana to look at directly, but clear enough to understand the scale of violence. The Veltar had acid glands that could dissolve metal. Retractable claws sharper than any blade. Paralyzing toxins in their saliva. The Zephyrians could generate light flashes bright enough to cause permanent blindness. Their crystal bodies could launch projectile spikes at high velocity. All natural abilities? All evolution, all supposedly civilized species that had grown beyond the need for crude weapons. But they had never grown beyond the weapons built into their own bodies. Hana felt sick. And Dr. Yoon?
He survived by sealing himself in an emergency pod.
His testimony became the foundation for everything that followed. The investigation, the trials, the complete restructuring of council security protocols. The screen showed a final image. The old council chamber, empty and dark with blast marks on the walls and floors. The Pure Peace Protocol died that day, Minho said, along with the idea that evolution automatically means the end of violence. But how does this explain why humans carry weapons now? Minho smiled grimly. Because humans were the only species whose capacity for violence was completely visible and controllable. Our weapons exist outside our bodies. They can be seen, regulated, and removed if necessary. So the council decided that honest weapons are better than hidden ones, that visible violence is safer than invisible violence, that the species most willing to show their dangerous capabilities are the species most trusted to control them. He turned off the display. Tomorrow, I will show you exactly how that decision was made, and why every other species in the galaxy now depends on human weapons to keep their own biological weapons in check. 6 months after the massacre, the surviving council members gathered for the most important vote in galactic history. Hana watched the historical footage as Minho narrated the session that would determine the future of interspecies cooperation. The emergency session took place in a temporary chamber, Minho explained. The original council hall was still a crime scene, sealed for ongoing investigation. Everyone was nervous about meeting again. The makeshift chamber looked nothing like the elegant diplomatic spaces Hana was used to. Basic metal walls surrounded a simple table where 8 species representatives sat with obvious tension. Empty chairs marked the locations where murdered delegates would have been seated. Chancellor Ro Sung-hoon was chosen as the neutral moderator, Minho said, pointing to a stern-faced woman at the head of the table. She had been serving as humanities trade representative and had no involvement in the original negotiations. The surviving delegates looked haunted. Elder Zonhai's crystal body showed permanent stress fractures from the attack. The remaining Nebulan representative kept his containment suit sealed at maximum security settings. Everyone sat far apart from each other. The first proposal was complete dissolution, Minho continued. Several species wanted to abandon the council entirely and return to isolated planetary governments. They believed interspecies cooperation was impossible after the massacre. Ambassador Telwan of the surviving Aquarians spoke first, his translation device carrying the weight of trauma. He argued that the attack proved different species could never safely coexist in close diplomatic contact. The Aquarians had lost 3 delegates in the massacre, Minho noted. Their representative wanted to seal their worlds and end all external contact. Similar arguments came from other survivors. The remaining Japhirian elders spoke about the impossibility of trust after discovering the extent of hidden biological weapons among council members. But dissolution would have meant the end of galactic civilization. As we knew it, Hana said, exactly. Trade would have collapsed. Scientific cooperation would have ended. Some species would have been isolated on single worlds while others expanded aggressively, without any diplomatic constraints. Security Chief Kwon Ji-hyo presented the alternative proposal. She appeared on screen as a compact woman with alert eyes and multiple visible weapons attached to her uniform. Chief Kwon outlined what became known as the Visible Force Protocol. Minho said, all future diplomatic meetings would include armed security personnel, capable of stopping any biological weapon attack. The proposal was radical. For the first time in council history, artificial weapons would be permanently present during diplomatic sessions. The security force would have authority to use lethal force against any delegate showing signs of biological weapon activation. The other species were horrified. Minho continued as the footage showed delegates reacting with obvious distress. They had spent generations moving beyond artificial weapons. The idea of returning to primitive tools seemed like evolutionary regression. Elder Zonhai's response was particularly emotional, her fractured crystal body flickering with agitated light as she spoke about the sacred nature of diplomatic spaces. She argued that weapons in council chambers would corrupt the purity of intellectual discourse, Minho translated, that the presence of artificial tools would reduce negotiations to threats of violence. What did we say to that? Counselor Ominji gave the response that changed everything. A middle-aged woman with tired eyes appeared on screen, rising slowly from her seat. Her voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. Counselor O said, and I quote, "We carry weapons not because we wish to use them, but because we are willing to be seen carrying them. Our violence is honest violence. We do not hide acid glands or concealed claws. We do not pretend our capacity for destruction does not exist. When we draw a weapon, everyone knows what is happening." The chamber fell silent as O continued her speech. Even through the historical footage, her words carried tremendous weight. She pointed out that every species in that room possessed biological weapons far more dangerous than any human tool. Minho continued. But those weapons were hidden, unregulated, and had already been used for mass murder during supposedly peaceful negotiations. O's argument was simple but devastating. Artificial weapons could be seen, controlled, and removed. Biological weapons could not. Therefore, visible artificial weapons were actually safer than invisible natural ones. The debate continued for days, Minho said as the footage jumped through multiple sessions. Species after species argued against the protocol. They claimed it would militarize diplomacy and return the galaxy to primitive violence. But the human delegation had prepared extensively. Dr. Kim Tae-hyung presented biological analysis showing that every council species possessed combat capabilities equivalent to military weapons. The data was undeniable, Minho said. The Veltar could produce acid strong enough to dissolve starship hulls. The Zephyrians could generate electromagnetic pulses that would disable entire space stations. The Nebulons could create atmospheric toxins that would kill thousands. Agent Park Hyun-woo revealed intelligence about the Shadow Alliance, showing documented evidence of coordination between multiple species in planning the massacre. They had training facilities, Minho noted, hidden bases where they practiced coordinated biological attacks, secret agreements for territorial division after eliminating opposition through evolutionary incidents. The evidence created a chilling picture of calculated deception. Species that publicly advocated for peace had been privately preparing for war using weapons built into their own bodies. The turning point came when Ambassador Lee Subin asked a simple question, Minho said. The woman on screen stood slowly, looking around the chamber at each delegate in turn. She asked, "If you truly believe that evolution has moved you beyond violence, why do you all still possess biological weapons more dangerous than anything humans have ever created?" The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Every delegate knew they possessed hidden combat capabilities. Every species had concealed the true extent of their biological weapons. The Veltar delegate tried to argue that their abilities were natural evolutionary traits, not weapons, Minho continued. Ambassador Lee responded by asking if natural weapons were somehow less deadly than artificial ones. The debate shifted as delegates struggled to explain why hidden biological weapons were morally superior to visible artificial ones. Their arguments became increasingly circular and contradictory. Finally, Chancellor Rowe called for the vote, Minho said. The choice was clear. Accept human security forces with visible weapons or abandon the council entirely. The voting process was tense. Each species representative cast their decision publicly, knowing it would determine the future of galactic cooperation. The Aquarians voted first, yes to the protocol, Minho narrated as the footage showed each delegate's decision. They had seen the alternative and preferred visible security to hidden threats. The Zephyrians voted yes after long deliberation. The Nebulons voted yes reluctantly. One by one, surviving species accepted that honest weapons were preferable to dishonest ones. The final vote was unanimous among survivors, Minho said. 8 species agreed to accept human security forces in all future diplomatic settings. What about the Veltar? The Veltar collective was expelled from the council pending war crimes trials. Queen Jithka and her co-conspirators were charged with premeditated murder and conspiracy to commit genocide. The screen showed the formal signing of Protocol 7 Alpha. Each delegate added their species seal to the document that would govern interspecies relations for generations. The protocol established several key principles, Minho said as the document appeared on screen. First, all diplomatic meetings would include armed human security forces. Second, any delegate showing signs of biological weapon activation would be immediately detained. Third, Humans would have authority to use lethal force to prevent evolutionary incidents. How did other species react? With relief, mostly. The survivors realized they had been living in fear of each other's hidden capabilities for years. Knowing that human guards were present with visible weapons was actually more comfortable than wondering what biological surprises might emerge. The protocol also established new transparency requirements. All species were required to declare their biological capabilities in detail. Medical examinations became mandatory for all diplomatic personnel. The most surprising result was increased trust between species, Minho noted. Once everyone's capabilities were public knowledge, there were fewer surprises and less paranoia. The screen showed the construction of the new council chamber, designed with human security stations and clear lines of sight for armed guards. The final ceremony was held 1 year after the massacre, Minho said. The footage showed delegates from all species gathering in the new chamber, with human guards visibly stationed around the room. Elder Zonhai gave the opening speech. Minho continued as the crystal being's words were translated. She thanked humanity for accepting the burden of visible violence so that hidden violence could be controlled. The burden of visible violence? Carrying weapons openly means accepting responsibility for their use. Not because we are more violent than other species, but because our violence is, the morning brought gray skies visible through the station's transparent sections, matching Hana's mood after witnessing yesterday's massacre footage. Minho had prepared even more classified files for today's session. The investigation began immediately, he said, activating the secure display. Colonel Shin Dongwu led the military inquiry while Detective Inspector Choi Yuna handled the criminal investigation. What they discovered changed everything we thought we knew about galactic civilization. The screen showed the arrival of human investigation teams at Nexus Station. Unlike the diplomatic delegations, these people came heavily armed and wearing full combat gear. For the first time in Council history, weapons were openly carried through station corridors, Minho noted. The surviving delegates were horrified, but they were also grateful to see visible protection after experiencing hidden violence. Hana watched investigators carefully documenting the crime scene. The council chamber looked like a war zone, with acid burns on the walls, crystal fragments embedded in the ceiling, and biological residue covering most surfaces. The first major discovery was the extent of hidden biological modifications among all species, Minho continued. Dr. Kim Sunhee, our lead xenobiologist, found that every single delegate possessed undisclosed combat capabilities. Medical reports filled the screen, showing detailed analysis of alien physiology. Each species had evolved or enhanced natural weapons that their diplomatic records never mentioned. The Veltar were the most obvious, Minho said. Retractable claws, acid production, paralyzing toxins, armored carapaces. But they were not unique in hiding their capabilities. The investigation had revealed that Zephyrians could generate electromagnetic pulses strong enough to disable electronic systems. Their crystal bodies were actually sophisticated biological weapons platforms, capable of launching high-velocity projectiles. The peaceful Nebulans had the ability to produce dozens of toxic gases, Minho continued. Some could cause instant death, others could induce paralysis or hallucinations. Their containment suits were not just life support, they were mobile chemical weapons factories. Even the seemingly harmless Aquarians possessed hidden dangers. Their electrical generation capabilities were far beyond what they had disclosed. They could produce charges powerful enough to stop hearts or disable nervous systems. Every species lied about their biological capabilities, Hana said. Not lied, Minho corrected. They considered these abilities natural evolutionary traits, not weapons. In their minds, they had moved beyond artificial tools while retaining natural defenses. Agent Nam Ji-hoon appeared on screen, a sharp-eyed investigator reviewing communication intercepts. His team had uncovered the shadow alliance between multiple species. The conspiracy went back years, Minho explained. 6 species had been coordinating their efforts to control council decisions through the threat of evolutionary response. They called it the Natural Order Initiative. Classified documents showed meeting records between species representatives. They had been planning to gradually eliminate opposition to their expansion plans by provoking conflicts that would trigger biological responses. The Kepler system was just the beginning, Minho said. They had identified 17 resource-rich systems and dozens of strategic locations they wanted to claim through coordinated evolutionary incidents. Evolutionary incidents? Their term for planned massacres. They would create situations where targeted species would feel threatened, then use their natural weapons in apparent self-defense. Each incident would reduce the number of voices opposing their territorial claims. The investigation had found training facilities where species practiced using their biological weapons in coordinated attacks, hidden bases where they stockpiled resources for expansion, secret agreements for dividing conquered territories. The most disturbing discovery was how long they had been preparing. Minho continued. Some species had been genetically modifying themselves for generations, enhancing their natural weapons while maintaining diplomatic facades. Dr. Park Ji-won, the team's genetics expert, had found evidence of deliberate evolutionary manipulation. Species that claimed natural development had actually been engineering themselves into more effective killers. They were creating weapons of mass destruction inside their own bodies, Hana said. Weapons that no security system could detect because they were not artificial additions. They were natural parts of allegedly peaceful species who claimed to have evolved beyond violence. The screen showed comparative analysis of different species' combat capabilities. The data was frightening. Nearly every council member possessed the ability to kill dozens of opponents within minutes. The only species without hidden biological weapons was humanity, Minho said. Our investigators found that humans were completely transparent about their capabilities. No hidden toxins, no concealed claws, no secret evolutionary advantages. Because we never evolved those things? Because we never needed to hide our weapons. Human violence has always been external, visible, and controllable. We developed tools instead of modifying our bodies. Agent Choi Minji had uncovered financial records showing the conspiracy's economic motivations. The Alliance had been systematically targeting the galaxy's richest systems and most strategic locations. They were not random acts of evolutionary aggression, Minho explained. They were calculated business decisions disguised as biological responses to stress. The investigation had also revealed the extent to which peaceful species had been living in fear. Private communications showed that many delegates suspected their colleagues' hidden capabilities, but were afraid to voice concerns. Ambassador Lim Hyejin documented testimonies from survivors, Minho said. Species representatives admitted they had been worried about biological weapons for years but believed speaking out would be considered primitive thinking. The interviews were heartbreaking. Delegates described constant anxiety about their colleagues' true capabilities. Some had stopped eating station food out of fear of poisoning. Others had requested private quarters to avoid potential gas attacks. The council's peaceful facade was maintained through mutual fear, Hana realized. Fear and willful ignorance. Everyone knew that biological weapons existed, but no one was willing to acknowledge the reality because it would have shattered their self-image as evolved beings. Technical analysis had revealed the sophistication of hidden biological systems. The Veltar's acid glands could produce compounds that would dissolve most known materials. The Zephyrian's electromagnetic abilities could disrupt any electronic system. Some species possessed capabilities equivalent to military-grade weapons, Minho said. The Nebulans could have rendered the entire station uninhabitable with the right gas mixture. The Aquarians could have electrified the water supply and killed everyone aboard. So why didn't they? Because they still needed the council for legitimacy. Total destruction would have been counterproductive to their long-term goals. They wanted to control the system, not destroy it completely. The investigation had traced the conspiracy's origins back to the council's formation. From the very beginning, certain species had viewed the democratic system as an obstacle to their expansion plans. They saw peaceful cooperation as a temporary inconvenience, Minho explained. Something to be tolerated until they could reshape the galaxy according to their preferences. Security footage from years past showed subtle coordination between Alliance members during previous council sessions. Votes that seemed random were actually carefully orchestrated. Diplomatic positions that appeared principled were actually strategic moves in a long-term campaign. They had been manipulating council decisions for decades, Hana said, while publicly supporting peaceful cooperation and evolution beyond violence. The greatest advocates for the Pure Peace Protocol were the species most actively preparing for war. The final investigation. Reports filled the screen with recommendations that would completely restructure galactic governance. The old system based on trust and evolutionary advancement was proven to be fatally flawed. Colonel Shin's security analysis was clear, Minho said. No species with hidden biological weapons could be trusted in unsecured diplomatic settings. The risk of coordinated evolutionary incidents was too high. So what was the solution? Either abandon diplomatic contact entirely, or find a way to neutralize the threat of hidden biological weapons. The investigation team recommended that all future council sessions include armed security, capable of stopping any evolutionary incident. But who could provide that security? The only species whose weapons were completely external and controllable. The only species with no hidden biological advantages. The only species that had proven completely transparent about their combat capabilities. The screen showed the final recommendation: Human Security Protocol 7 Alpha. All future diplomatic meetings would include armed human guards with visible weapons capable of stopping any biological attack. The logic was simple, Minho said. Humans with guns could stop Veltar with acid glands, but Veltar with acid glands could not be regulated or controlled. Therefore, human weapons were the safest option for maintaining order. So we became the galaxy's police force. We became the galaxy's honest police.